Now, with just about 29 days to that event, the country seems to be divided on whether to vote yes or no. Political parties, civil society organizations, chiefs, religious leaders, and ordinary Ghanaians have divided views on the proposed amendment. Now, we're going to hear all of these stakeholders. First, according to the Institute of Local Government Studies, 75% of the vote on December 17 is likely to be yes. This is based on a poll that they conducted out of 6,550 participants across all 16 regions of the country. Nicholas Awache is the director for the institute. Let's hear from them.
The results show that 66% of registered voters are aware of the referendum that is about to take place in December 17th. I think this is an improvement, and given that we have about 4 weeks to the referendum, awareness rate of 66%, and given that media campaign on this started very late, this is an impressive. Not only that 66% of the registered 6,550 people that we talked to were aware, but also 54% of these people could explain the rationale for this referendum. That is the amendment of Article 55(3), and I think this is also positive. So that is the figure you see there. In terms of awareness by age, and this is worrying, that the youth, that is between the ages of 20, are the ones that are not aware. As you can see, more than half, or say close to half of these people. Now, voters' preference for yes or no vote. Again, the referendum requires that those who turn up to vote, 75% will have to say yes to the question before the referendum, or before that Article 55(3) can be amended. This is dead on the number 75. Given the studies margin of error of plus or minus 5, I think this is encouraging with 4 weeks to go, but also it tells a lot. Out of this, 13% say they have not made their mind whether to vote yes or no, but only 12% said they will vote no. And this is good news for the yes campaigners, but we will come to that later when we join the campaign.
Meanwhile, in Parliament, the minority has issued a 3-line whip directing its members to back the National Democratic Congress's position to vote against the upcoming December 17 referendum or face the wrath of the party. Now, the opposition NDC in a press conference last week asked Ghanaians to vote against the proposed amendment of Article 55(3), which will allow political parties to participate in local level elections. But speaking on the Super Morning Show with Daniel Dadza, the minority leader Haruna Idrisu urged all NDC MPs to toe the party line.
Our attention was drawn to Article 55(3) and the way the language is couched in the constitutional amendment bill. Political parties, and all we need to understand is a political party taking part in national competitive democratic elections. And my understanding is that the NDC National Party has taken a position, and accordingly on Wednesday and Thursday I issued a 3-line whip for all NDC MPs to comply and to ensure that we vote no at the referendum. The party has raised very key constitutional and other critical national security issues that must guide policy action and indeed guide even government. Now, the government of President Nana Addo Dankwa introduced in Parliament, the first of it was an amendment to Article 243 of the Constitution, which requires that MMDCs can be elected. I should say that the decentralization system of Ghana, dating back to PNDC Law 207 of 1988, is a baby of the NDC, and decentralization itself, thanks to Professor Kwamina and Nensin and others, we've deepened it even though we've not achieved the ultimate. So sometimes my colleagues in government who boycotted the 1992 Constitution, they don't understand the principle and the purpose for which the decentralized, when I say the drafting of the Constitution, they don't seem to appreciate what the ETO to be driven by decentralized Ghana. So accordingly, when Article 2431 was introduced, we drew government's attention. I've seen my colleague holding the Hansard of 29 July 2019, that the amendment before Parliament was flawed because it was not comprehensive enough. And if that amendment passed, which is just an amendment to Article 2431 of the Constitution, we would not be doing justice even to the principle of an elected MDC or DCA. So we said, for instance, Article 2433, which removes the DCA from office. So you are saying that the DCA should be elected, yet the president can fire him the next day after he's elected. That defeats the purpose. That is not part of the amendment the president introduced in Parliament. So if you are amending only 2431, you are doing cherry-pick, half-hearted constitutional amendment, which does not allow for even the elective principle that you are so espousing. Now, if you come to Article 248 of the 1992 Constitution, and with your indulgence, let me read 248. It's even fundamental, yet the president's amendment was silent on it. It reads, a candidate seeking election to a district assembly or any lower local government until such unit, a candidate seeking election to a district assembly or any lower local government unit shall present himself to the electorate as an individual and shall not use any symbol associated with any political party. So it may a political party shall not endorse, sponsor, offer a platform to or in any way campaign for or against a candidate. So yet the amendment before Parliament is also silent on Article 248.
Now, the Deputy Minister for Local Government and Rural Development, Obi Amwa, says the NDC's latest position is at variance with their earlier promise and commitment to elect MMDCEs on partisan lines.
The County Bishops' Conference organized a massive program for all the parties. The General Secretary of NDC said they are fully in support of yes. MPP said that, CPP said that, PNC with a caveat. But based on that, the Catholic Church has gone around the country campaigning that the parties have consensus. So vote yes. Now, with what you've come out, what do you want the church to even take you for? That you come to us, give us a pledge, you tell us that you are all for it, we should go along, we spend resources to get people along, then you come at the last minute to say that no, we have changed our mind.
The National House of Chiefs says they wrote you a letter, you didn't respond.
It's not true. With all due respect. With all due respect. I have the records. With all due respect. I don't think...
You haven't received any letter from the National House of Chiefs asking them to explain the 30%?
I'm saying that we responded. And if apart from responding, at the forum at Mensvik, that issue came up. We responded.
What was the response on the 30% appointment?
I said that it will be premature now for us to say that we should just recognize the role of chiefs in this whole thing. So after a referendum, it's a good opportunity for all of us to sit down and see how we will place the role of chiefs in this whole local governance system. That's how we responded, and they were satisfied with it. I even drew the attention of Professor SKB Asante that you were part of the experts who wrote the Constitution. I've read your report. What you put in is not what the government accepted.
Right.
They said, 248, I think 248 is a major issue that we should address. 248 talks about political parties not sponsoring candidates at the local government level. But 248 is not entrenched. If you amend 248, before you go for a referendum, you haven't done anything.
All right, so let's get straight into the conversation. Joining me in the studio is the director of the Institute of Local Government Studies. You heard from him earlier, Nicholas Awoche, announcing the results of a recent poll that was done across the nation. Mr. Awoche, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us. So we understand the broad headlines from your poll. Help us understand how you arrived at them. So, for example, you talk about the number of people who are aware of the upcoming referendum, but not just who are aware, but who understand what it's about. Okay, so what percentage of the people you polled understood that this was about Article 55.3?
Thanks very much. In terms of the 6,550 registered voters that we spoke to, 66% claim to be aware of the referendum coming on December 17th, out of which 54% of them could explain that it is about the amendment of Article 55.3 of the Constitution.
Okay.
And close to 45% of these people also indicated that it is about the election of DCs or municipal metropolitan chief executives.
Right.
So you see the confusion that the difficulty that is shared is that you cannot explain to Article 55.3 without reference to the election of DC, because they ask 55.3 and so what? If we change, Article 55.3, so what? And then you link it to the election of...
so help me with some clarification. You say 66% are aware of it.
Yes.
And 54% of that 66.
Yes. Could explain.
All right. So that would mean that about 35% thereabouts of the entire sample can explain that it's about 55.3.
Yes.
Now, this is curious because I can assure you that amongst the press, amongst the media, I will be impressed if 35% of us understand what the referendum is about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody is a political journalist, so let's be fair to them. But I will be impressed if 35% of those who are paid to know actually know. So were you alarmed or amazed to find that so many of the people you sampled actually understand to the point of knowing which actual law it applies to?
An interesting thing is that the regions that were created, the newly created regions, were the ones that had even more awareness. In OT, for instance, about 93% are aware of the referendum coming because it resonates with what their experiences in recent past, because they had organized the referendum in the area, so they could explain that very well. The poll also showed that the lowest awareness rate is in Greater Accra, Accra Eastern region, and it was surprising that we find this, because in Accra, that's why you have all the TV stations. This is where you have all hundreds of FM stations and radio. And awareness in Accra was far lower than the national average of 66, and so that was interesting.
Well, I mean, as a scholar of local government, what does this tell you? What does this mean? How have we arrived at this sort of, in terms of exposure and awareness and education, this almost upside down result?
I think this is the interest that people have in local government politics. Since 1988, the only time we had higher turnout was in 1988, the first time we had 55% or 58% around that time. Since then, it has been 29%. In fact, the average over the past 6 local government elections had been 39%.
Right.
People have no interest in local government because I think people struggle to understand how local government relate to them. But that should not be the case. That is where development takes place, and that is where lack of development takes place.
Right.
But because all our attention has focused on central government politics, we seem to have relegated local government politics to the background. And this is where the amendment of Article 55(3) aims to kill. But now it looks like it has turned into a political game, and it's unfortunate because initially I think in discussions in Parliament appear to be on consensus. And if you look at the study, both NDC strongholds and MPP strongholds had 73% of NDC strongholds ready to vote yes, and MPP strongholds 76%. So average, you're talking about 75. But now this study was carried out before NDC made the declaration of vote no, and this is likely to affect the outcome.
So what is the plan? Are you going to go back into the field?
Yes, we have the database of the 6,550 people we spoke to.
Right.
We have all their phone contacts, and we intend to carry this study in 2 weeks' time to find the extent to which the NDC statement influence their preference.
Now, let's also not forget that we are talking about 6,500 people, you know, out of the entire 18 electorate.
Yeah, 18.6.
How representative is this number?
It is. Scientifically, it is. If you take a confidence interval of 95 with a margin of error of 1% or even 5%, this is how we did a sampling. With a voter turnout, a voter population of 18.6 million, around that figure. We did 99% confidence interval, confidence level, and then with 5%, 5 confidence or margin of error.
Yeah,
that gives us 4,400 electorates to speak to across the nation. That is assuming that there's homogeneity across regions, but it is not. And so we move a second step to look at the regional voters population. And so in each region, we took a confidence level of 95 with a confidence interval of 5, and to look at each region, taking their different, heterogeneity as a case. And that gave us 6,100. If we had taken 99% confidence interval, that will give us 10,000, and that will be too much for a resource base. So we then move to that, and then we look at the districts, looking at the urban and the rural districts, looking at the municipality, metropolitan, and looking at the districts. So with that, we purposely selected 44 metropolitan, municipal, and districts, taking all the metropolitan, this is 6 metropolitan, so we covered all the metropolitan areas.
Right.
And then with the 6,000, or what do you call it, 6,100, we're now looking at how do you sample the individuals you talk to. So this was scientifically done, purposely selected, and to be able to get.
So you believe that this group of 6,100,
6,580
people are representative?
It is
of the
scientifically.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I just before you go, would it surprise you to know that JoyNews had a much less scientific poll on social media, where we put the two issues, yes and no, and ask people to vote. And by the end of, in fact, within a matter of 2 hours, we had more voters than your entire sample. You know, almost 7,000 voters within a couple of hours. And the poll is still ongoing, and it's currently standing at something like 82% no and 18% yes.
That's what I'm saying, that we finished this study the day before NDC organized, NDC had their press conference, and we did also 2 days before the National House of Chiefs. And of course, this is not scientifically done. Ours is more scientifically done because it tells you that people who live in the municipality, people who live in the metropolitan, in fact, people who live in the district have more information. But if you look at the voting pattern, it never changed, both from municipality or metropolitan or NDC or MPP strongholds. And it was because there was consensus from the beginning.
Right.
But now, if we do it again, perhaps it will change.
It might be different. Okay, so this is how I want us to wrap up.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can do this as a yes or no. If government were to come to you for advice, whether or not to scrap this referendum, on the basis that they need 40% of the electorate to participate, first of all, then they need 60% to say yes?
75%.
75%
yeah.
to say yes. And on the basis of the position advanced by the NDC and the fear of the polarization, they are genuinely forecasting that they may not get a yes. And they are asking you your advice. Should we go ahead with the referendum or should we scrap it? What will your advice be?
Well, it's difficult to say yes or no at this moment. I think having consensus before the referendum will be key for the voter turnout. With this polarization going on, and if NDC, say, members go with their party position, we are talking about almost 40% of the population, not other turning up, or if they turn up are going to vote no. If they don't turn up, a no becomes a default.
Right.
Yeah, because then we will not likely to get 40%. If they turn up and vote no, the likelihood of getting 75% will be a very difficult task, especially if they stick to their. So I would rather say that having consensus to this, I think they should be able to go back to the parties to sit down and say,
so
we need
without a consensus, you would not advise government to go ahead with the referendum?
Without consensus, it will be difficult at this moment. And you wouldn't also want a polarization that we have now.
Okay. All right. I want to thank you. I wish we could have gone on a bit longer on this, but I certainly appreciate your thoughts on this, mate. Thank you very much for coming through. Let me read a few of your WhatsApp messages. They've been coming thick and fast. This one is from Abu in Damongo, and he says, in fact, I'm very disappointed in the actions of the NDC MPs in Parliament, and I therefore question their use as well as benefit of the NDC MPs in Parliament. Fascinating thought. Also coming through today is a message from, there's no name with this one. It says, good afternoon, political parties to be involved in elections of MMDCEs. I think it is not the way forward at all. The polarization in our political landscape has already created enough tension. We need not add others in the name of a referendum. Maybe one more, and then we should be able to wrap up. And this one says, when I see how democracy has taken the love of humanity, their speeches to each other, I wonder if they are idolaters or Christians. Oh, okay. In fact, our leaders are not setting a good example for us to imitate, and I think that is about the political parties that are going up against each other on this matter.